Like many countries which emerged from the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine has had a problem with corruption since the 1990s. Consistently, on the Corruption Perception Index, they have ranked under 40 out of 100, which means that there is broadly a very high perception of corruption, both high and low. It means that there is perhaps low trust in government to do the right thing without skimming a little bit off the top. Over the last decade, especially since the Revolution of Dignity in 2014, which ousted former President Yanukovych, Ukraine has done a lot of good work to root out corruption in society. It still exists. It exists everywhere. But there are now systems in place with transparency in mind which actively seek to combat against it and ensure that it does not fester as it once did. Today we will be discussing the award-winning government contracting platform Proro. You are watching Uniquely Unseen. If you enjoyed today's piece, please don't forget to leave a comment, share the video around, and subscribe for more. Across the world, government contracts are big business. Think of any private company, whether it's McKinsey, General Mills, Tyson, Rolls-Royce, they all have, at one point or another, been involved in government contracting. The American airline industry got its feet off the ground because the Army decided that planes were just trains for the sky and they should get the Army airmail contract. So airplanes carried mail. That is one of the reasons why your average economy seat doesn't cost $700 anymore, because the airline companies are able to make a lot of money by transporting cargo. In many countries that emerged after the fall of the Soviet Union, with the one exception maybe being Estonia, government contracts were how people managed to make a living in the chaos that was the 90s. If you could secure a contract, you knew that the government would not run out of money. The military would not run out of money. So sure, government contracts are a fairly benign way for a private business to make a decent amount of money off of a stable source of revenue. What is corrupt about that, I can hear you ask. Where is the corruption here? Well, you have to remember that the 1990s were a time of economic hardship for Central Eastern Europe. This was a period of time where who you knew in society mattered way more than whatever your company did. If you happened to know somebody who worked in an office that dealt with government contracts, and you knew somebody who could supply the service, or you yourself could supply it, whether it was food or uniforms or war materiel, a person engaging in corruption would submit a bid for that contract at a highly inflated value, and then pocket the difference, with oftentimes, but not always, the public official involved getting some kind of a kickback or a perk. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether the person supplying the contract is the friend of some contracting official or somebody who perhaps has millions of dollars to their name and can buy the official a nice dinner or a house. All that matters is the government gets their services rendered in a timely manner, and as far as they are concerned, in a manner that is efficient in cost. What makes the system in Ukraine and arguably the rest of Central Eastern Europe so unique is that this system of personal connections did not originate in the 1990s, rather it originated in the 1920s or even 40s, when communist governments were introduced to these countries. Knowing people and establishing the right connections were how you got ahead in society, and as that old way fell, people used that same logic to get out what they could as things crumbled around them. From November of 2013 to February 2014, Ukrainians rose up in what is known as Euromaidan, or the Revolution of Dignity, saying no more to the corruption, no more to the oligarchs, no more to Yanukovych, no more to the lack of transparency in their dealings with the state. I remember at the time watching the Euromaidan unfold, seeing journalists from the West like Simon Ostrovsky walk through the former palace that once housed the Ukrainian president Yanukovych. I was shocked at how wealthy that place looked. The White House is one thing, Orban's residence is one thing, but Yanukovych lived in a palace, a true gaudy palace that only can be achieved if you take from the state and use it as a personal piggy bank, as he did. The revolution ended in early February of 2014, but that only meant the work to build a new country, a more transparent country, would begin. The pilot program for Proro would start in May of 2014, held up by Transparency International, developing the database with several partners in the business sector to develop its IT systems. At the core of its mission, the idea is that everyone should be able to see everything with regard to procurement. In practice, what this means is if you are a Ukrainian, you can go on to Proro and figure out when the contract was released, who bid on it, how much they bid on it, why they won the contract, all the various documentations that are involved in their winning of that particular tender. All of this is publicly available. Within its first year, Proro is estimated to have saved the Ukrainian government $1 billion in costs related to corruption. That is to say, they were spending $10 billion more than they needed to in state contracts. Now, they spent $9 billion. That was year one. Within year two, Proro is estimated to have reduced corruption in Ukraine overall by 25%. Now, of course, instituting Proro in and of itself does not automatically rid the country of corruption. I said it reduced by 25, not 99%. However, there is a great deal of public trust now and confidence that they can understand who did what service for what price and when. What you have to understand is that corruption exists in Ukraine and other developing countries due to a factor of weak institutions and inefficient processes. To give you two examples just from the last several years, in 2023, the Kyiv Independent, an English-language news outlet covering Ukraine, based in Kyiv, reported that the Ministry of Defense allegedly paid double the retail price in order to procure eggs for soldiers, among other foodstuffs. When you buy in bulk, typically the idea is that you pay less than retail price, or at least not double. Another story reported on by the Kyiv Independent discussed how in 2023, a military official located in Kyiv Oblast allegedly stole up to 30% of a military warehouse's food supply and sold it on to shops and restaurants in their local area with the help of private entrepreneurs. You can find a link to both articles in the description down below. Jakub Parashinsky and his team do a great deal of interesting work. The fact is, neither story would have likely been reported on in most other developing nations because most other developing nations don't have a platform like Proro where you can go on and check how much the Ministry of Defense agreed to pay for foodstuffs. Proro is no cure-all, but what it does extremely well, and it's a system that is looking to be expanded into private sales so that there can be trust in civil society when selling things like state property to civilians or municipal buildings or old factories and so forth, buildings which may have been condemned, that sort of thing. It's a system that is trusted and that has room to grow. To me, Proro does not just represent a revolution in public procurement, it is a revolution in how civil society interacts with its government. The people of Ukraine woke up one day and said, no more. We want our government to be honest, transparent, to tell us about its dealings, to end the corruption. And with Proro, they have one avenue to ensure that corruption is mitigated. It probably will not end, but Ukraine, for the time being, has a truly revolutionary tool to combat against it from the source. Ukraine in 2024 is facing some of its darkest days during the full-scale invasion. I feel for everyone in Ukraine, and I truly hope that the situation in the country will improve after the end of the full-scale invasion. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava.